okay, listen, if you want followers, then these are all the things you need to know to be successful in social media, to be successful in digital, which comes down to...
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Today, we're speaking with a business and digital strategist who's best known for generating over 1 million followers on social media in over 100 countries in less than 30 days. He's worked for Fortune 500 companies, some of the world's biggest brands, and high-profile celebrities such as Taylor Swift and Rihanna. With more than 60 billion pieces of content being shared across digital platforms each day, how do you cut through the noise, stop the scroll, earn the click, and capture your audience's attention in less than 3 seconds? Well, our guest today is here to show you how. So please welcome the author of the best-selling book, 1 Million Followers, Mr. Brendan Kane, to the Escape Your Limits podcast.
Is 1 million followers or is a lot of followers valuable or not? It's all what you do with it. You know, it's all about how you maximize it. The world that we live in today, there are a lot of people with a lot of followers. And I know people that have 10,000 followers that are making millions of dollars, in some cases, tens of millions of dollars a year. I know people with millions of followers that aren't even making 7 figures yet. So it really comes down to that strategy, that foundation of how you're going to maximize it and leverage the audience that you have. Now, can a large audience, drive significant value for a brand or business? Absolutely it can. We see it all the time. But again, like if you don't have that foundational piece, you don't have that strategy. It's not like, hey, you're going to generate a million followers 30 days from now or 90 days from now, and all of a sudden people are going to cut you $100,000 checks. It just doesn't magically appear. And, based on your experience, you would know this from any aspect of business. So it's no different when it comes to social media.
Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code DUMBBELL. That's escapefitness.com using the code DUMBBELL. That's it for me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview. So Brandon, thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast. I have been studying you, listened to a bunch of the previous podcasts and interviews you've done, and I'm very impressed. And I guess one of the questions that sort of came to my mind was sort of 1 million followers in 100 countries in 30 days. Was this something 10 to 15 years ago you had ever imagined that you'd be pretty famous for doing?
Well, 10 to 15 years ago, I was just starting in the social media realm because social media was just brand new. So I don't know that I ever really thought about it. And that's kind of the way that I go into things is like, does it interest me? Does it intrigue me? Where I started off was really helping other people become famous or, helping, I first started 15 years ago in the film industry, 16 years ago. And it's like, well, how do we get hundreds of millions of people to know about a piece of content that we just invested tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars in? So really at that point in time, when you talk about 10, 15 years ago, it was really more focused on solutions and strategies for the companies and clients I was working with, not about like how it pertains to me and my personal brand. I don't think I had a concept of a personal brand at that stage in my career.
So what would you say, a couple of things then, I guess there's people at different levels that may be listening to this, but I suppose how was the world back then? You were promoting films and artists and that kind of stuff. And prior to, I suppose, YouTube and the following apps, what did people have to do then? And how is the world differently today, whether that's easier or better or more, more effective to be able to kind of achieve that, promotion of a product or a movie or something?
Well, back when I first started, this is like 2005. It's when social media really started to take shape. Like Friendster started a little bit prior to that. I think it was like 2002, 2003. But when I kind of started in the film industry, I was, first off, like how I got into it is I went to film school and quickly realized they don't teach you anything about business there. And that's what I really wanted to learn. So I figured I had to figure out a way to learn what it takes to build and launch and scale a business in the most cost efficient way, and still holds true today. It was online. So while I was going to college, I just kind of learned and experiment in creating some internet companies. And then when I moved to LA to pursue a career as a producer, I quickly realized that everybody else and their mother wanted to be a producer. So it really didn't allow me to stand out. It wasn't a strong hook point, so to speak. So I figured that I would leverage that knowledge in starting those internet companies to go to producers and directors and studio executives to say, listen, I know how to tap into these digital audiences at a scale from a very cost efficient way, because typical movies is you're doing television, print, radio, which can be very expensive. And because this was really early on, I had found, and I still know to today, like different strategies of how you can tap into audiences at scale for essentially little to no cost. So I just started testing that hook to get my foot in the door, because like everybody else, I was starting at the bottom, making coffee and copies and deliveries and finding that extra edge. And then when, the studio executive started to have interest in that, then I started looking at, okay, well, how do I actually execute on it? I had a general idea of with the last companies I started, but I obviously had to construct this for movies specifically. So I first started just tapping into blogs, movie blogs, because there was plenty out there. And then I started to analyze social media platforms. The big player at the time was MySpace. And I was just kind of looking at at the time, Fox had acquired it for $600 million. And I wanted to better understand, well, how are they going to monetize that? And when I saw that whole business model was flawed, it was relying on bottom basement CPMs, I started to think about, well, can you tap into these audiences of these people that are connecting with their friends or connecting with their audiences? And this is back in 2005, 2006, 2007. There's no such thing as an influencer. The term wasn't there. There wasn't influencer marketing. And I just saw, well, what if we tapped into these people that are starting to gain more traction with their friend base or their audience and play to working with them to distribute our message? So I ended up building through that, like the first ever influencer marketing platform on top of MySpace, not knowing that what it was, is just like, I was like, can we monetize this consumer to consumer communication? So that was one experiment. And then I started studying YouTube at the very earliest stages and said, well, these YouTubers are amassing these large audiences. Why don't we tap into them? So I just made a list of the top 100 YouTubers at the time. And I just, hey, do you want to interview a movie star? And I got like 4 of them to respond and basically didn't have to pay anything for it. And I think that was kind of the first iterations of stages of looking at social media or digital platforms specifically to promote movies. And then obviously it kind of continued to grow from there.
Right. You use the, and I guess after reading and listening to a lot of this stuff, you use this sort of 1 million followers as a hook. But I suppose there's also a lot of talk at the moment about people that are just trying to gain lots of followers, but in a lot of cases that doesn't necessarily result to anything more than just sort of it doesn't always relate to business success. So a couple of questions. Why did you choose that to be a hook? And can that also be seen as sort of like negative in kind of for people to think that that's a good thing? And secondly, in your experience, what's the relationship between having these big followers and actual people that are in business? And does it translate to business in any way?
So I mean, I always start with any client that I work with, and we get a lot of people, thousands of people that reach out to us every month because of the 1 million followers book. And their first inclination is always to want to hire us to craft a strategy on how they can generate 1 million followers or followers at scale. But I would say like 8 times out of 10, we craft a completely different strategy for them based upon their goals. Because the world that we live in today is just because you have 1 million followers or whatever that number is, doesn't mean you're reaching 1 million people. You have to have the right content strategy in place that plays to the algorithms, plays to the audience, and also plays to the business goals of what you're trying to build. So that's the first place that I start with any client. And again, if all the stars align and we feel that the client is ready, we feel the client is best served by generating followers, and we have a content strategy in place to reach all of those followers, and we believe it's going to help them reach their goals, then by all means, we know how to generate followers. We know how to do that at scale, and we'll help clients with it. But oftentimes what we find is a client either doesn't have the right resources, is not in the right place to go after that goal. So we'll craft other strategies based upon our experience in all disciplines of digital marketing, not just social media, and also business development, to first drive those goals, drive revenue, drive profit. And then at that point, we can determine whether we want to reinvest that profit into going after the follower goals and that reach and engagement. To your question about the 1 million followers as a hook, the reason I designed it is because it is an effective hook. It grabs people and brings people in. And what I say is the hook is there to win the first 3 to 5 seconds so that you can open up the deeper conversation that you want to have with the clients and customers. And we, in crafting hook points for our brand and for our clients, we have a clear distinction between needs and wants of the consumer or the clients that we're going after. There is oftentimes people fall flat because they're focusing so heavily on the need, what they know that the client needs, but the client or the customer may not have that realization. So for example, with the 1 million followers hook, I know that that's what people want, for better or for worse, and we can talk about that. People want followers and they want big numbers of followers. So I lean in with that hook and I say, okay, listen, if you want followers, then these are all the things you need to know to be successful in social media, to be successful in digital, which comes down to the understanding of how to test content, reference different content creators and break down formats, the psychology of communication at scale, how to construct shareable content. Now, if I would have led with any of those, if my book was The Art of A/B Testing on Social Media Platforms or The Art of Psychology around shareable content, it wouldn't have the same impact. Yes, I could still sell books, but again, what I'm saying is if you really want followers, then these are the things that you need to consider. These are the things that you need to learn. And if you've read the latest versions of my book, I have a very clear distinction of asking them, do you need to make money today? Or do you need to make money in the future? You're looking at the long-term play over the next few years. And based upon that, it will determine how you should focus and how you should use the materials in our books and our supplemental materials. So that was the real reason behind the hook, why we chose it, and also how we construct hooks and approach clients from a social media or digital perspective.
The number is a big thing, and I've been in lots of conversations both with our business and other people's business about the follower count, whether that's trying to find influencers to represent products or promote it, or to get their own business to a certain level. What, in your experience, and you've tested, from what I understand, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of bits of content, and work with many people. Is there a myth around it's good to have a lot of followers, or is the other side of the argument? I read the book, 1,000 True Followers. I think that was the title. Is it better to have a smaller group and focus on just having a smaller people? So going deeper as opposed to wide. What recommendation would you have for people who are just trying to figure this out?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's not a single answer to it, because we see it depends on the business. There's so many different variables of how we make that decision. And it's kind of interesting because we have, clients, we have a consulting firm that really helps clients stand out at the highest levels to achieve their goals. And a lot of them will come to us and say, okay, we want to generate 1 million followers in the next 90 days. Can you guarantee that? What is the budget we're going to have to spend? How much are we going to have to invest? All of these things. And what we always tell them is, listen, we're not going to put you in a box and give you the same strategy as every single person. Like, we tailor it to the individual based on a number of different variables. What is your goal? Do you have to generate revenue today? If so, what is your core audience? What is the core makeup? What is the deal size of that? Where does that customer live? What are the resources that you have? Are you an amazing content creator? Have you created any content? Out of that content you created, has anything gone viral, or has everything fallen flat? All these different variables will come into play to how we advise our clients to be successful. To your other question of, is 1 million followers or is a lot of followers valuable or not? It's all what you do with it. It's all about how you maximize it. The world that we live in today, there are a lot of people with a lot of followers. And I know people that have 10,000 followers that are making millions of dollars, in some cases, tens of millions of dollars a year. I know people with millions of followers that aren't even making 7 figures yet. So it really comes down to that strategy, that foundation of how you're going to maximize it and leverage the audience that you have. Now, can a large audience, drive significant value for a brand or business? Absolutely, it can. We see it all the time. But again, like, if you don't have that foundational piece, you don't have that strategy. It's not like, hey, you're going to generate a million followers 30 days from now or 90 days from now, and all of a sudden people are going to cut you $100,000 checks. It just doesn't magically appear. And, based on your experience, you would know this from any aspect of business. So it's no different when it comes to social media. So I'm not deterring away and saying having a lot of followers is a good or a bad thing. It really comes down to the underlying strategy that you have. Like, when I generated 1 million followers in 30 days, it wasn't like, hey, I'm going to generate 1 million followers and I'm going to start selling them t-shirts after the 30 days. And that's my strategy. I mapped out a long-term strategy for it. Is first, before I even did the experiment, I called one of the most prominent literary agents in the world that's represented $5 billion worth of book sales. And I said, listen, I'm thinking about doing this experiment. Do you think it would be a good book? And if I do it, will you sign me as a client and get me a publishing deal? And he said, yes. Okay, so that was the first indicator. Then the second indicator is I knew that once I had a published book, it would help me get on stage and speak in front of thousands of people, get on TV, get on radio, get on podcasts, to build that brand foundation. I was emulating what Tim Ferriss did with the 4-hour work week, of using that as like a core pillar of the brand foundation. So I knew in all of those things that I was doing around generating the 1 million followers, I was leveraging online against offline opportunities to drive massive revenue. And that revenue has amassed into millions and millions of dollars. Now, have those 1 million followers, those initial 1 million followers, bought stuff from me? Yes. But it's not like that was my core focus. The core focus was an experiment. The core focus was key learnings that I could share with the world of what was possible, and playing the long-term game. And the monetization really didn't come in until like a year and a half later.
So what comes first then? Like, if you're a business in today's world, whether they're starting or existing and trying to grow, what comes first? Is it your goals and picking the tools to sort of meet your goals, your specific goals in terms of what you want to do with the business? Or is it you thinking about how your business can play within the rules of a lot of these different apps and platforms? Do you have to kind of say, okay, well, if I want to do that, I'm going to have to change sort of how we not necessarily operate as a business, but communicate and interact? Which one of those do you think leads in your thought, or should lead in your thought process to social media?
The first one is goals. What are your business goals? What are the, and we have something called Mogul Market Math that we give to our private clients. And it's a 5-step process that we use internally, and the friends that have created billion-dollar companies use to scale. And it's all predicated around what is the math that drives your business. It's amazing how many businesses, both startups and billion-dollar corporations, don't really know the fundamentals of what drives the business. And you have to understand that first and foremost. You have to understand, what the short-term value of a customer or a follower is to your business, what the long-term, what the lifetime value is, so that it can really give you a sense of where the investment should be made and what is successful or not successful. It's so many people will go in and hire a social media agency or social media manager, and then they just kind of magically think things are going to happen without setting any goals or expectations out of it to benchmark your success against. That's number one. Number two is mindset. Mindset is so important. I can tell right up front whether a client's going to be successful or not based on the mindset of how they're going into things. Like any aspect of business, you have to be open-minded. We have so many clients come in that hire us for expertise, and then they push back when we give them the expertise on how to do things. They're like, oh, that's not how to do it. Or I've got to focus on these elements of branding or tonality or these things before they've even gotten something to work. So the mindset is critically important. Then when you have those things out of the way, the most important thing is content. Content is everything. Sure, you can hack the system, get a bunch of followers, but those followers don't mean anything if you can't reach them. And the algorithms have become so strict because the amount of content that's published to these platforms that your content needs to be on point. Like you need to be able to understand how to create content that plays to the algorithms to get reach and distribution, but also engages your core customer. It's amazing. And we're working on a video and also a subsequent training system right now, because 99% of brands suck at social media. And they suck at social media because they're approaching it from the mindset of how content was produced 10, 15, 20 years ago. Is they're approaching content of a one-to-many conversation, meaning they're starting off with saying, hey, everybody, or hey, you all, I want to share this message with you. In a very general sense, that's the position they're taking, versus that one-to-one communication of how this message or this content is designed for the individual, and also playing to the structures of how do you create pattern interruption, stop the scroll, and then how do you retain that audience for as long as possible.
So with the different platforms that are out there, Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, all kind of, I guess, social media platforms, but all, I guess, very different in terms of the content. As a company, if they weren't hiring someone like yourself or your agency, are there any guidance for people to try and think about, well, which platform should we focus on? Should we focus on all? Because there's TikTok and God knows how many other ones that seem to be popping out. How should people think about where to start getting into it? Is there an entry point for as you're sort of exploring this, this journey?
Well, the first place that I always recommend people start is, what is a platform that you use the most? Because you have to become a student of the game, even if you're hiring somebody to help you. Is one of the core elements that we have people focus on is creating references. You're going out and studying people in your industry, outside of your industry, and essentially understanding and dissecting the formats, the story structures, the things that the people are having success with, in addition to the areas that people are not having success with. And that only comes from studying and consuming content on that platform. Now, that doesn't mean because you're on YouTube 2 hours a day or on Instagram 2 hours a day or TikTok or any of these platforms that you are actually learning. You may just be consuming content. So we first shift that mentality and create tracking sheets for our clients and ways and exercises that they can really dive in and learn what are the driving factors of content for other creators that are doing it well. Then once you have that set aside, then you can start looking at the business applications of the platforms you should be choosing and the consumption behavior of those platforms. So for example, if you're a B2B business and you're going after a target market of 500 companies that have 10,000 employees or more, then we're going to focus more on LinkedIn because we can get more strategically targeted. Versus, TikTok skews a bit younger. Now there's other growing sectors and growing demos on the platform, but that's a completely different audience and a completely different type of content that you're producing. Then you look at the consumption behavior of like a YouTube, which is long form consumption. You can get people to watch 10, 15, 20 minutes, some cases an hour if your content's really dialed in, versus, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook is designed around short form consumption behavior. And there's obviously pros and cons to both. With long form consumption behavior, with YouTube, you can build a stronger relationship with your audience. You can build a stronger brand application. But there's obviously a lot more that goes into creating a 15-minute piece of content than a 30-second piece of content. So those are kind of the variables and the exercises that we walk through with our clients to help them determine, the best place to start and the best direction to take.
Mm. Are there any platforms that you see as being more interesting than others? I know it's a difficult question because everyone's got different goals and different businesses, but I guess one of the things that I suppose a lot of people have seen with Facebook and even Instagram is the algorithms seem to change a lot, and there's more people on the platforms, and so organically it's very difficult for even your friends to kind of see you. Is that just the case of a lot of these platforms across the board, or do you see any in particular that you think, well, actually at the moment in general, these are ones where you've got the opportunity to probably make more progress organically?
Yes and no. I mean, you can look at TikTok, and TikTok is doing this on purpose. They're really smart, whereas their algorithm is more friendly to the new content creator. You could have 10 followers and get a 1 million view video. Like, that's possible on TikTok. Whether that 1 million views actually translates into something is another story to what we were talking about earlier. So there is favorability with TikTok right now from an algorithmic standpoint. I don't know how much that's going to, last, but the reality of the situation is the algorithms, do they shift? Yes, but all the algorithms operate in the same way and will always operate in the same way, because their whole entire business model is predicated on how long people stay on the platform. That's how they make money. So if you want to be successful in social media, no matter the platform, all you got to do is master two things. Those two things are very simple, but not necessarily easy to pull off. The first part is, can you stop the scroll or earn the click in the case of YouTube of clicking the thumbnail and headline? Because if you do not stop the scroll, or if you do not earn the click, that is the first signal to the algorithm that, listen, your content is not going to hold attention because it can't even grab attention. So that's your first job. The second part is, once you have attention, how long can you hold it for? It's the retention graph. It's retention around your content. Those are the two things that you have to master. Again, it's two simple things, but it's not easy to pull off. If you can master those two things, you will be successful no matter what social platform that you launch on.
What's the type of person that you need, or type of people you need in that? Because I guess there's the content itself. So, and I'm going to try and sort of simplify it, but you've got the little video clip, the 30-second, 60-second, 40-minute video clip. But then also I've heard you talking, and you really go into a lot of detail, really go into the weeds, where you test tens or hundreds of thousands of bits of content and tweak everything from the headline to the image to the hook, etc., which sounds as though that's a very scientific type of person that you need to be able to do those. What are some of the key people, and in what priority, if you're hiring, should you start with to stop the scroll and then to retain the viewer?
Well, again, it goes down to the goals. So first off, what is the goals? What are we hiring for? Are we focused on generating leads and sales today? If we are, then we need to focus on the best direct response advertisers out there that, again, understand these principles, because these principles play into your effectiveness with direct response as much as it plays into organic. Because from a direct response or a paid media perspective, the more that you can stop the scroll and hold attention, the more likely you are to convert. The more it shows the auctions and the paid algorithms that your content is good, it's engaging, thus it'll bring down your effective CPM or bring down your cost in reaching to those people. So that's from a paid perspective. Organic is really tough to find good people. And we just created an HR partnership, and we're creating a whole training course because we even struggle to find the right people. And finding the right people, there's a few things that you need to look at. Is one, what is their track record? Have they created stuff that has gone viral in the past? Because that's your first indication of whether they can do it. Because if they haven't created viral content in the past, the likelihood of them being able to come in and create viral content for you is not likely. In addition, you've got to kind of read between the lines, because some people may have worked on a big influencer account, somebody that's already generated hundreds of millions of of views or billions of views. But just because they've worked on that account doesn't mean they're responsible for it. So we have, friends like a Prince EA or the people at Goalcast or Yes Theory who are masters at this. And because they're masters at this, they've earned so much clout in the algorithm, so much trust that they get immediate reach and distribution. So if somebody just comes in and does some aspect of it, doesn't necessarily mean they understand how to do it for another client. So again, like, what is their experience? What is their track record? Beyond that, what we look for is we're looking for people that are on these platforms all the time. Going back to the research side of it, we want people that know all the top content creators, that spend hours on social media, consume content, know the best content creators, are looking at trends, understanding it. Because that, again, fundamentally, you have to understand what's going on, how people are being successful, the formats and structures to make that successful. Now, let's just say you have those two things and you find the magical person. You've got to get out of your own way. Because that's the problem that we experience with brands where the brands that we fire or the brands that fire us that are not successful is because they cannot get out of their own way. It's like the analogy of they don't want to hire us because they see 1 million followers or they see that we've generated 50 billion views for our clients. So they initially buy in. We get on this high-speed train. We're going 200 miles an hour. And all of a sudden, the head of brand or the head of marketing jumps in front of the train and says, no, this is not on brand, or this doesn't have the voice, or we need to have this specific colors or tones. What happens when somebody jumps in front of the train? The train slams on the brakes and it derails and the whole thing crashes. Now, I'm not saying that you have to make crazy decisions or things of that nature, but it's oftentimes it's probably more about the person that's hiring than the person that you're actually hiring, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the content itself, then you said, goal is to stop and retain, and you also just mentioned about where people get very protective about their brand, and I can understand that. We like to feel that there's some brand identity, as a lot of people I've spoke to do within the videos and the style. But one of the things that we found as a business is if you just, we spend a lot of money on really nice produced stuff, but then if we get a camera in front of someone very badly shot, but it tends to perform better depending on what we want to, the results we're going to get. So with someone's, getting involved in all kinds of content, what's your, I guess, thoughts and recommendations and advice on sort of content? Is social media stuff meant to just be very real? It's not meant to be polished. It's not meant to kind of have all your brand colors and everything in, or is it? Or is there a combination of the two?
Social media is meant for the audience, not for yourself. And where most people go wrong is they're designing content for themselves, or they're designing content based upon what they want to say, not about what the end user wants to hear. Nobody's going to an account because they're like, oh, it has amazing colors. It has amazing brand consistency. The tonality is amazing. They're engaging in following content or content creators because they love the content. And I can understand from a brand marketing, a brand marketing expert wanting to protect the brand. I completely get that. But if you're just focusing on what you want to achieve as a brand and not the actual person that's consuming the content, you're going to fail every single time.
So what about people that are, our audience is a lot predominantly in the fitness sector, and there's a lot of fitness influencers that do extremely well, like individuals, and a lot of them tend to be, they seem as though they're successful because they look great. Whether the workouts and that they do are correct or not, it could be questionable. But then if you're a sort of fitness company, you have a gym or whatever, how do you, in this day and age where there's so many fitness people on there, how could you think about breaking through from a content? What if you own a gym, what could you think about to get your brand out there? Because you've probably got all the expertise that you need to be able to provide some value. But how do you translate that and stand out with all the noise that's currently out there?
Yeah, we have a lot of experience in working in this sector, and the same principles apply. Is one, you've got to understand the pattern. You've got to understand the pattern of what everybody else is doing in your space in order to stand out. Because most people, what they'll do is they'll just look at what everybody else is doing and try and duplicate it without really understanding, is that person actually being successful? Number two, there's a huge myth out there of, oh, because somebody's beautiful looking or sexy, or the way that they're showing off their body is driving their success. And the reason that's a myth is because you can see plenty of beautiful people. And I have models, I have fitness trainers, people that are reaching out to me that are beautiful people, but they're not driving this success. So again, it goes back to those two principles: is how do you stand out in those first 3 seconds? How do you disrupt that pattern to stop the scroll or earn the click? And then what is the story you're telling? What is the content that you're doing in order to hold that attention as long as possible? But again, that exercise first starts off with analyzing what everybody else is doing in the market so that you can really break that pattern and stand out.
Right. And when you say stand out, so really the thing that you probably don't want to do is look at the competitive landscape and just try and imitate that. What you're saying is to find a different edge and angle which probably nobody's seen before, that's going to get someone to say, oh.
No, I'm not saying that. I recommend imitating if they are people that are having success, right, and you dissect and set a hypothesis of why they're having success. What happened? I'll give you an example. We're working with one of the top luxury fashion brands in the world right now. So we did an exercise and we were looking at like Chanel. We were looking at Prada, all of these ultra luxury brands, and they have huge followings. They're in like the 30 million followers. But when you look at their content, they're not getting any reach or engagement. They suck at content. It's the legacy of the brand that carries that follower number. So they initially wanted to look at those brands as a reference. And we said, yeah, we'll look at them as a reference of what not to do. So that's where it's like, you've really got to study. So if you want to study a content creator, are they really having success and performance? Not just from the follower number, that is one indicator, but how much reach, how much engagement are they getting on each post? And in looking at that content creator, if they are successful, look at their highest performers, look at their lowest performers. That will teach you what to start emulating, and then also what not to do to see if you can reproduce it. But we want you to also look at the people that are underperforming as well, because that will, again, reinforce what you shouldn't do. Now, within that, there's so much nuanced details to why somebody performs. It may be that it's their performance. Like, for example, Prince EA, who wrote the foreword for my first book, he's an amazing performer. So we can take a subject about environmentalism and make that go viral where nobody else can make it go viral because of the way that he conducts that. So you've got to understand, is it the performance that they're doing? Is it the content format that they're driving? Maybe it's the insight that they have or the way that they're packaging or contextualizing that insight that's driving that performance.
Yeah, it sounds like there's so many things. The more you get into it, the more you realize you don't know. And I've after studying your stuff and talking to our marketing team, I'm almost like, you end up getting extremely confused. And particularly when you mention the amount of tests that you've done on certain campaigns. You know, again, it was, I think one of the examples you gave was something like 75,000 bits of content you tested. How does a company, you know, that's a crazy number. Is that only for big businesses with big teams, or what if you're a relatively small business of, you know, like less than 100 employees? Can you realistically do that, or have you got to get an agency to manage a campaign of that effectiveness?
You can do it. Like I did that by myself. Like when that client, I tested 75,000 variations. It was over 18 months. I did it myself. Do you have to do that? No. There's different ways of testing. And that's, again, why when we work with clients, we meet the client where they're at and give them the strategy. And one of the things is, and I think you probably realize this from reading my books, there's not one way to be successful. There's multiple approaches. And that's why in all of my books, I provide different perspectives from different experts in the field so that they can make the determination of the direction that they can take. But the most important thing is that you test. I don't care if you test one variation, 10 variations, 10,000. Are you learning? Most people are failing with social media because they're buying into this whole frequency thing. They believe, because they've been told by many people, you have to post every day, multiple times a day, and that's how you grow. Now, maybe that worked 7 or 8 years ago, but that no longer works today. So if you're just constantly posting for the sake of posting and you're not learning with each post that you put out, whether you're learning organically or through paid, then how do you plan on growing? You're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again, and you're going to expect to go viral. And 99.9% of the time, that strategy is not going to work.
You say that posting several times a day or frequency is not no longer working today. What is it? Is it just less but better quality? And what are some of the rules that people are doing now in terms of posting and frequencies?
Well, again, I'm not saying it never works. I'm saying it doesn't work for the person that hasn't figured out which content structure format is best served for them. Mm-hmm. You have to learn what works first, because it's like let's just say that you're in sales and you just go out with the same sales script, or we'll talk about trainers, like somebody's marketing a gym or their service and they just go off with the same thing. Is like, let's just say that your strategy for sales and signing up client is ab workouts for 10 minutes a day. And you just keep doing that over and over again in different ways, but nobody wants 10 minutes a day of abs. Like, it doesn't matter how many times you put it out there, it's not going to convert for you. So you have to test and learn. So for like a trainer, like, what is it that people are interested in? What type of exercises, what type of pain points, what type of challenges are they facing? And then once you get a solid foundation under you, then you can really figure out how to do it at a higher frequency. Another example is with the 1 Million Followers book. The book has been out for 2.5 years, I think, at this point, maybe longer. And, I've rewritten it 3 times, but even within that, the hook is solid. I know the hook works, but we're always finding different ways of contextualizing it to increase performance, to get more people buying the books, to get more people opting in. So your job, first and foremost, before you can even think about frequency, is how do I get one thing to go viral? How do I learn to get that one piece of content to go viral? And it may take one piece of content, it may take 10, it may take 100, it may take 500 pieces of content before you really crack that code. And then once you figured out how to make that one go viral, then you can take that one learning of what you did there and see if you can do it again, and then again, and then again. It's like, I have a lot of musicians that reach out to me because of my work with like Taylor Swift, for example. And they said, listen, our job right now is just to make one song go viral, one video go viral. Through that, you can generate a lot of learnings and you can build a foundation from it. But you just doing the same thing of you as a musician, just performing in front of your iPhone or your computer every day, 10 times a day, it doesn't mean anything if you haven't really figured out the substance of what people want.
Right. So you're not, I guess you are a kind of celebrity now in the social media world, but you're not a Taylor Swift. What were some of the things you did then? And you've done it a couple of times, or a few times, I believe. What were some of the key things that you did to be able to go to 1 million followers? Because that, I suppose people would think, do you buy them? Do you get these sort of, like programs that automatically do stuff and send stuff out? How did you do it? How many people were involved in doing it? And what were some of the things that moved the needle more than anything else? What was the Pareto principle in getting, the 80-20 and getting to that 1 million?
Well, it comes down to content. Everything is content. You can't gain anything without content. Now, people look at, without reading my book, they don't really understand. It's not like I just created this once for my account and that was it. Like, my team and myself collectively, on all the clients and projects, we've probably amassed well over 50 million followers across accounts, and we're well over 50 billion views at this point. And really, it comes down to the content. Is why should somebody care. Ask yourself, like, why does somebody give a shit about me or this content I'm putting out? If this person knows nothing about me, which is the place that most of us start in, how do we grab that attention? How do we get them to care enough to go to our account and click the follow button? That's what it is. Now, there's different principles. When I did the first time, 1,000,000 followers in 30 days, I did it on Facebook. And that way, I tested 5,000 variations of content over 30 days using the Facebook advertising platform, not using it as a media buying tool, but using it as a market research tool to be able to test content at scale, measure the effectiveness of putting content in front of content formats in front of certain audiences to share it at a high velocity, and then the correlative impact of getting somebody to opt in to click the follow button. What we did on Instagram works very differently. So we created a different strategy where we were tapping into larger pages to distribute our content organically to then drive back to opt-in. So there's many different tactics that you can take. There's paid tactics, there's organic tactics. We break all of them down in the book, and we help our clients, make the right decision of which direction to take. But honestly, I don't think it really matters of whether you're using paid tactics and when I say paid, I mean white hat paid. I'm not talking about bots or fake followers. I'm talking about using advertising networks or advertising distribution channels to seed your content to audiences that know nothing about you to then opt in. But there's organic strategies as well too to grow, and we break down both, and our team has had experience in both elements. But there's this kind of interesting demonization around paid advertising, and people will look at, for example, like The Rock, who I think is the most followed person on Instagram now, or a Ronaldo, or an Ariana Grande, and they're like, oh, well, they built these audiences organically. It's not true. It's like The Rock, every movie The Rock is in, their marketing budget is at least $100 million. So those $100 million are growing his brand. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I think it's awesome to be in that position. Or LeBron James. Nike probably spends hundreds of millions of dollars marketing LeBron James to sell more shoes. So kind of get that out of your head of, do I have to choose paid or organic? If I use paid, is it bad? Is it going to result in unengaged or fake followers? No, it comes down to how effective of a content creator are you? And again, you can grow in multiple different ways using different strategies.
Have you found, as you've done this a few times, that you've been able to get more engagement? Because I guess one of the questions that's probably in people's minds is, oh, okay, it's great to have 1 million, but are they 1 million people that they're actually interested in it and engaging over a period of time? What have you learned from engagement, and what lessons can you share from that?
It's all content. I mean, I know people that have gained hundreds of thousands or millions of followers purely organically, and their engagement sucks. I know people that have generated hundreds of thousands or millions of followers using paid tactics, and their engagement is awesome. It comes down to content. That's the number one thing. It's very, very different than what it was 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, where you would amass a large following, and automatically the algorithm would give you 30, 40, 50% reach. It's not the world we live in today. So the value of your followers is predicated on how good of a content creator you are to reach those followers, because the algorithms are the first line of defense of whether you're going to even reach them. So most of the time when I look at accounts that have low engagement, it's not because that they have fake followers or those followers are unengaged. It's simply the algorithms are deeming that their content is not stopping the scroll and not going to hold attention. Thus, they're going to prioritize other content ahead of them. And so it's if you have an account that has 1 million followers and the average post is getting 10,000 likes, it's mostly because most of those people aren't even seeing their content. So it's like everything is, and I know our book leads with 1 million followers in 30 days. We do that on purpose, but a lot of our content that we're teaching people is how to become a better content creator, because that is the most important thing. Everything else will fall into line if you know how to create content that stops the scroll, and holds the attention.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, really. I think that's, for me, that sort of helped even from, listening to a lot of the stuff you've done is that's where you should be focusing on. And then, the rest of it will sort of come off that, depending on what your strategy is as well. I've got a couple of questions before we finish off, but before I go into that, would you share, like, if people want to get some advice or get some help, what ways have you got to sort of to assist other business owners and individuals on on this, learn more about this journey?
I would go to hookpoint.com. And even if you're interested in the 1 Million Followers book, start with the Hook Point book or start with our Hook Point principles, because that sets the foundation for everything that we've talked about today of how to stop the scroll, how to keep and retain audiences. And at hookpoint.com, you can schedule a call with our team of how we can specifically work with you directly, or you can get our book or our masterclass and any of that.
Okay, great. And what would be some, for people that have sort of realized that they need to, this is an important area for their business, but they're probably, at a very basic level, what are sort of like the first one or two moves that they should do in terms of their decision making, or people, or even questions that they should start to get their heads around? Where's a good kickoff point for people?
You got to start with a strategy. What are the goals that you're trying to reach? What are the business goals? What are the financial driving factors of your business that will set the foundation of what actions that you take? That's the most important thing. That's why when we work with our clients one-on-one, we spend a great deal of time really understanding who our client is, what their competition's doing, where they want to go, and the best course of action and the cleanest and most direct path to achieve that.
Okay. And in terms of the future, what are you seeing is likely to happen? And I know it's a difficult question, but you're sort of in this a lot more than probably most of us. Where do you see the next 5 to 10 years in the social media space? What's going to be important? What could people sort of start looking or reading about to get a glimpse into the future?
It's a great question. And really the fundamentals that we've talked about today and the fundamentals in the Hook Point book are going to be critically important no matter where it goes. Is, can you grab attention? Because I don't care where social media goes, if it transforms into something completely different, there's still going to be the need to grab attention, because it's always going to be noisy. When you build a tool that anybody can access, anybody can publish on, that creates a tremendous amount of noise. So it's less about, if you really want to focus, I think it's less about where social media is going and more about how you can become a master of grabbing attention and holding attention. Those are the most important things. Over the next 5 years, do I think social media is going to transform drastically? I don't think it's going to transform drastically. You look at 10 years out, it really depends on the hardware. The hardware dictates the software. So if you really want to know where social media is going, just pay attention to the technology that's going to transform the way that these apps or platforms need to exist in these ecosystems.
Do you think that will create a lot of, I suppose, trying to get the right word, like being very dramatic in terms of, the stories people tell? Like, you look at some of the news networks and it's really kind of probably, I can't think of the exact word, but it's just trying to create controversy for the sake of it so that it will get attention. Do you think that is a concern, that's where it will end? Because the more freaky and strange and attention grabbing the story, the more eyeballs that people will get.
No, I'm not totally concerned with that, because like you look at clickbait, for example, like clickbait was a huge thing. A lot of people made a lot of money off of it, but people catch on to it. Clickbait fails today because, again, clickbait may win the attention, but if it doesn't match up to the content and hold the attention, it falls flat. And I think people are smart enough. Like they're going to start reading between the lines of what is something that is out there just to grab attention versus something that's there to provide value. I'm not saying that's going to be fixed tomorrow. I'm not saying that doesn't work today. It may not work for a year or two, but to me, it's and we see this examples all the time, and we have some examples on our blog. You can make any subject interesting. Like we have examples of doctors going viral. We have examples of accountants going viral because they're contextualizing their message of value to their audience. So it's, if you want to be successful in social media, it doesn't mean that you have to be in a bikini. It doesn't mean you have to spew hate. It doesn't mean that you have to throw out these widely controversial things. Are there examples of that going viral? Sure, there are. But does that mean that you can reproduce it? No. And we see plenty of examples of other people doing amazing things with content that aren't doing anything like that and having success.
So final question, Brendan. I appreciate your time today. Some great insights there, that's for sure. I'd like to ask you a final question, which is Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and gone on to make it possible. What would be an example of escaping your personal limits?
Changing your perception. I mean, that's what it comes down to, is if you have limiting beliefs, it's because you're perceiving a situation, a challenge, a solution, or yourself in a specific way. And if you want to overcome that, then you just need to change the way that you personally perceive it, not the way that other people perceive it.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.